What's going on social media? Today we're going to be looking at an article to see best ETF to buy now in June 2026. Now, at the end of the day, I'm looking at this article to see if I agree with this article to buy ETFs for my retirement account. Now, this is my Roth retirement account. And in my Roth retirement account, I only buy ETFs, mutual funds, and the index. I don't do individual stock in it just because I want to retire off of it and I don't have time to do day-to-day tracking on it. And when you buy single stocks, pretty much you're taking a risk, and I'd rather just broaden my horizon and optimize my return with very little. So let's look at this article today. I'm Dong, or YB, and today we're going to talk about this article. And I'm not a financial expert. I'm just some guy on YouTube that ran an 8-figure company and been studying and researching about finance for the last 10 to 15 years. So this video is for entertainment purpose only. So the article I found is Zach, our research, your success. Best ETF to buy now for June 2026. So I'm going to go straight into the ETF State Street SPDR Portfolio S&P 500 ETF. Well, I'm going to go ahead and go to MSN. I just like it better because it is easier for me to navigate. I've been using them for years now. So ticker symbol SPYM. SPYM. So let's make sure this is the right one. SPYM. State Street. So State Street SPR portfolio. So do they pay a dividend? Yes, they pay a 1% dividend, and their expense ratio is decent. It's 0.02%. So they have decent expense ratio. Let's see how they've been performing. Now, this is the 1 month. It's 1.66. Year to date, 10.24. So that's 1 year is 24.73. That's pretty good. 3 years, 70.48. And 5 years, 80.65. So the 1 year, comparing it to the S&P average, is 14%. So we can compare this with the S&P. Let's compare S&P index. Year to date. And year to date, let's do 1 year. 24.98 is the S&P. 24.73 is the State Street. So if I compare the 1 year, the S&P 500 beat this. So I really won't recommend this. If it doesn't beat the S&P 500, why divert? Now, the other thing we can look at, what's the S&P 500 expense ratio? I'm just going to open this in another window. And put it side by side so we can see it. P 500 index. So side by side comparison. 24.98, 24.74. Okay. So the S&P still outperformed it. Not by much, but it did. The other thing we need to look at is how much the S&P charge us for expense ratio. Where is it on here? Portfolio, S&P. It doesn't say it. So I'm gonna use AI on this to see what's the S&P is 0.02%. So S&P, nope, that's the wrong one. INX advance ratio. Okay, so something I learned today, the S&P has zero expense ratio. So if you're gonna pay someone to do your investment, I recommend them to outperform the S&P. If the S&P charge zero for investment and these people charge 0.2% or 0.02% and they don't outperform the S&P index, there's no point of buying this stock if we're comparing it to S&P. So this one is a big no because it does not outperform the S&P and it has a higher expense ratio than the S&P. So I can't recommend this over the S&P index. Now let's look at the next one, QQQM. QQQM. And let's see what they compare. 1 year, 37%. Year to date is 19.85%. 3 years, 100%. So let's do a side-by-side comparison. So side-by-side comparison. The side-by-side comparison. The 1 year, year to date, one's at 10%, the S&P 500, and the other one's at 19%. So for the expense you're paying for this one, yes, it is worth you buying. But their expense ratio is a little bit high, 0.15%. So if you have 0.15%, every $1,000, they're taking $15. That's the math on it. But they have a good enough return to pay that. So 25, 37. So you're getting an extra 12% return a year on the 1 year, and 3 years, you're getting an extra 30 or 29%. So will I recommend the NASDAQ 100 ETF QQM over the S&P? Yes, because they're outperforming them. Now, the other thing I look at is what stocks they hold. Well, this one has the top holders. It's NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft. And the S&P is just the top 500 companies in the United States. And if we compare it, this is only has 100 companies, and the results tells a difference. So the funds invest in at least 90% of its asset in security that form this index. So will I recommend the NASDAQ 100 ETF over the S&P? Yes, because they're outperforming. Now, they do have a higher expense ratio, but yes, that doesn't matter because they completely outperform the S&P for the returns. So the last one I'm going to look at today is AIUM. iShare Gold Trust. What are they? They're a trustee can reflect general performance of the price of gold before payment of trustee expense and liability. So they just track the gold. They don't pay dividend, and their expense ratio is pretty high at 0.25%. They have gold bullion for commodity and other asset is less. So this one tracks gold. Now, I rather have physical asset of gold, but hey, that's just how I am. Now, year to date, it only grew 0.69%. 1 year, 28% compared to 25%, which is barely beating it, but still beating it. 3 years, it is 120% compared to S&P 71%. And 5 years, it's 143% compared to 81. The issuer is BlackRock. So do I recommend this one? Yes, because one thing is diversify your portfolio already, and two, it outperformed the S&P. So at the end of the day, 2 out of 3 of these I recommend compared to the S&P. Now I'm using S&P as my benchmark just because I want to see which one does better. Now, before you go and buy any of these, make sure you check what stock are in each one, because some of the companies in that ETF you might not like and might not want to buy it because of that. So that's where you do your due diligence. But by looking at the performance metric and the expense ratio, 2 out of 3 I would recommend comparing to the S&P performance. Like and subscribe to my video. That's all I got for you.